So, hey everybody, and welcome to the Socialist Party USA's State of the Union response. We're following up after the Biden administration and their eponymous Biden himself gave their State of the Union address earlier this evening. We're joined this evening by Dr. Stodden and Stephanie Chilinsky, the two candidates for the presidency of the United States furnished by the Socialist Party. And we just wanted to give some thoughts and responses to the address as it unfolded. We will be accepting comments and questions following this our remarks. I will be operating a stack system, so if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to type into the chat or the comment section on the right just the word stack. I'll be curating that list as it's underway. It's should be visual on the screen where my webcam is supposed to be, and that will just be a first on, first off. So first, yeah, that's how we will manage comments. So I'm going to hand off the reins to Bill. We do have a brief video response that we'd like to show first, but I leave that in Bill and Tony's competent hands. So, Bill, you have the floor.
It falls on me to introduce the response to the 2024 State of the Union address that Joe Biden gave. We have pre-recorded this because we wanted to make sure that we had a response ready to play at the end of this. And technology being what it is, we have a very limited budget. So we wanted to make sure that we had something to send out. So here is the Socialist Party's response to the 2024 State of the Union, and after that, we will return for a 20 to 30 minute live discussion. Thank you. Hello, my name is William Stodden, and alongside my running mate Stephanie Chilinsky, I am standing for election to the office of President of the United States as the candidate from the Socialist Party USA. I wanted to take a few minutes following President Biden's 2024 State of the Union address to introduce myself and to present a socialist platform for the U.S. In the State of the Union, President Biden laid out his vision for the United States. This included policies which are most certainly inefficient half steps, which can and will be easily rolled back or watered down by those who oppose change. And we should not expect anything more from the chief architect of mass incarceration and a lifelong war hawk. President Biden doesn't seek to take definitive action on behalf of the working and poor families and individuals in this country. He is ideologically committed to the status quo, regardless of the damage done to working families and the working class in America. He has consistently failed to step up and fight for working families and individuals, most especially when doing so might run afoul of the interests of the donor and investor class who funds his political party. The one promise the Biden administration has kept was the promise that he made to a group of wealthy donors in 2019 after admitting that he needed their money. Biden promised that nothing about our class system or standard of living would fundamentally change. He has ensured that wealth inequality, which reached crisis levels during the pandemic, not only continued during his administration, but got worse. During Joe Biden's tenure in office, the U.S. government has done nothing to offer any kind of support to consumers who were crushed by record high inflation that entirely reversed the tiny gains that workers made during the pandemic, when there was a bottleneck in the labor market that forced employers to pay workers better. The stock market did well under Biden, but consumers have experienced nothing but pain. And just because we are used to it now doesn't make it any less painful. Let us not forget that the Biden administration promised Americans a $2,000 bribe to vote for Democrats in 2020. And then, as soon as Democrats won, they allowed the Republicans to cut that bribe down to $1,400. Defending that cut as a necessary measure to force Americans back to work, before he allowed the expanded and refundable child tax credit, which lifted millions of American children out of abject poverty, to expire, reinstated student loan repayment, and interfered in union negotiations between railroad unions and employers on behalf of investors. Biden's domestic policy has been one disappointment after another, whether it be his choice to means test and therefore doom student loan forgiveness, his refusal to move on critical criminal justice reform, his complete inability to protect reproductive and gender rights, or his unwillingness to work for legislation to help poor and working Americans afford housing. His administration is a string of broken promises, half-hearted performative outrage, and stunning ineptitude. We have ongoing inflation, underemployment, wage stagnation, and the lack of a living wage, growing child labor, an unchecked housing crisis in major cities and small towns, and critically high levels of food insecurity all across this country, including in my own county where 1 in 5 families are food insecure, and 1 in 3 school-aged children in my town are eligible for free or reduced price lunch. I live in Iowa, where a lot of that blame for those numbers falls on the Republican Party and our sociopathic governor, Kim Reynolds. But we certainly do not see any help whatsoever coming from the federal government or any sign of acknowledgement of this problem in rural America from the Biden administration. Biden will not resolve these crises that Americans experience. He cannot. He is tied completely to the Democratic Party, who does the bidding of the owning class in this country. The Democratic Party is a capitalist party. Joe Biden said in August of 2023 that he is, quote, a capitalist. He has no empathy for the struggles of the working and the poor families in this country. The socioeconomic system he enthusiastically embraces requires a permanent underclass who are kept poor and desperate to serve as cheap labor for those who make their money and their living exploiting the labor, skills, and time of others. Even though this administration currently brags about low unemployment, our economic system would collapse if everyone had a good paying, safe, dignified job, because capitalism requires a portion of us to always be hungry, homeless, and desperate, so that we can be used by them to scare those who are lucky enough to have jobs into accepting low wages, no benefits, and unsafe working conditions. Parties that are fully captured by capitalism have made it their one mission in life to pass policy to ensure that nothing about the reality of the American worker will fundamentally change for any of us. As socialists, Stephanie and I have a different set of priorities than the President of the United States. Our priorities focus on the advancement of the working class. American workers consistently report that they want good jobs with good wages, where they can feel pride in their work, where they can make enough money to pay their rent, feed and clothe their family, and also have something left over to either put something toward the extras in life or maybe to send their kids to school. No worker wants to work full-time and still be able to qualify for SNAP. They want to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And retirement would be nice. Getting rid of the economic system that exists for the benefit of the wealthy and powerful is the first step to addressing the clarion call of workers all across this country. We support a federal jobs guarantee, which can take many forms, including a national civilian service program that would redirect wealth and political power away from the capitalists and their servants in the political system and into the hands of working Americans. We support stronger grassroots unions that are not captured by the Democratic Party and their capitalist backers, and we support workers owning and managing their own workplaces and using those workplaces to achieve power in society and control over their own living conditions. Workers know their job far better than absentee bosses or investor-serving boards of directors. We support the radical position of fully nationalizing and socializing the Fortune 500, turning those enterprises over to workers to own and run for their benefit and for the benefit of the entire society. In short, we support things fundamentally changing in a way that can never return to the capitalist mode that our economy exists in now. Other programs our campaign supports for Americans are a national health service, which would slash healthcare costs and provide universal access to all, and also make a determined effort to finally address the mental health crisis in our country, which includes compassionate care for individuals who are suffering from mental illness, and with an aim to remove the stigma around mental illness. We also support a no-compromise 30-day minimum paid national sick leave, as well as family leave for all. Such sick leave could have saved hundreds of thousands of lives during the pandemic, and it can be won by an organized labor force during a period where workers can wield unprecedented leverage and power. We support a socialist reconstruction for the environment, which goes farther than the Green New Deal, creating jobs in the public sector and addresses ecological destruction without subsidizing the private sector or increasing waste, pollution, or horrific labor conditions associated with some renewable technologies. Stopping our ecological death spiral can only be made possible by ending the multi-trillion-dollar war machine and putting the large Fortune 500 corporations under democratic, socialized ownership. The billionaire shareholders who profit from death and ecocide will never stop doing what directly benefits them, no matter how much money we throw at them to try to get them to do something different. We also call for radical expansion of substantive democracy by eliminating both corruption in public officials through real accountability and by eliminating barriers to full and meaningful participation in local and state government. We seek to address the historic wrongs of our society for both slavery and genocide through the formal acknowledgement of our debt that our society owes to the descendants of chattel slaves and to Native American nations, and actively working with these communities to begin paying reparations and to honor treaties made with indigenous populations. This campaign is committed to the ideals of economic and social equality. Only as equals can we ever overcome the privilege of a few that keeps the rest of us from controlling the conditions of our own lives. Only as equals can we all move forward together. We can build equality in our society, but we cannot do that as long as capitalism still exists. And we cannot fight capitalism without fighting the racism, sexism, exploitation, and classism that goes to support that capitalism. The fight against capitalism and the fight against supremacism are one and the same fight, and we are committed to that fight. On foreign policy, the Biden administration has been an absolute disaster. After being instrumental in foisting a 20-year-long conflict and occupation in Afghanistan on the United States, and then completely mismanaging the end of that occupation, Biden has got us into two additional foreign wars, one in Ukraine and one in Palestine. Democratic neoliberalism and complementary Republican jingoism has allowed 2 years of war in Ukraine to continue in a way that lets the U.S. pursue its belligerent foreign policy against Russia at the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives, the destruction of Ukraine, and more than $120 billion. In Palestine, the U.S. diplomatic support, financial and military aid, and hypocritical performative outrage has permitted the State of Israel to conduct genocide against the Palestinian people and utter and complete destruction of Gaza. The U.S. is directly behind these immediate conflicts, and capitalism and neoliberalism drive U.S. foreign policy. This says nothing about the way the Biden administration ignores conflicts in places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, which have displaced more than 500,000 of its own people, or commits atrocities against the working people of Yemen, who are protesting Israel's genocidal war against the working people of Palestine. The Biden administration does nothing about the problems our economic system, or our appetite for illicit drugs, or our enthusiasm about exporting arms and ammo abroad creates in Central and South America. And then it punishes migrants and refugees who flee to the United States to escape the crime and violence at their home. Our government accepts no responsibility for the problems that their uncritical adherence to capitalism creates. A socialist foreign policy aims at peace first and foremost. Whatever else is going on in other countries around the world, one of the most serious threats to life and peace and prosperity of the people of other countries is imperialism driven by U.S. capitalists and our private military sector. We aim to end that once and for all. I have long sought to end U.S. intervention in foreign affairs at all levels and reduction in U.S. military spending. And it is in these policies, not the policy of war and imperialism, that will lead to both peace at home and overseas. The Socialist Party in our campaign has called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza since the beginning of this conflict. We support the efforts of the Palestinians to achieve peace and have long supported a single-state solution in Palestine, which is multi-ethnic, secular, democratic, and free of external interference. We support a complete and immediate end of U.S. foreign military aid to the State of Israel. The U.S. is a main instigator in the ongoing conflict in that region. Peace is possible if the U.S. stops using Israel to further its own foreign policy aims. We also support a suspension of military aid for Ukraine. Currently, the Biden administration is keeping just enough aid going to Ukraine to continue to prop up the Zelensky administration, but not actually win the war. Our policymakers brag about the notion that Ukraine is Russia's quagmire, to use that conflict as a tool to weaken and humiliate Russia. A withdrawal of military support for Ukraine will force the resolution of that conflict, and an end to the death and suffering for both Ukrainian citizens and for Russian conscript soldiers who are being forced to fight in the meat grinder of a new Cold War. We call for an immediate withdrawal from U.S. bases overseas. We call for the abolition of NATO and other militaristic, belligerent alliances. We call for the U.S. to step down from its position in the UN Security Council, a position it uses almost exclusively to resist the efforts for peace around the world and shield war criminals, foreign and domestic, from any sort of accountability for their atrocities. We call for unilateral nuclear disarmament and dismantlement of all strategic and tactical nuclear, biological, and chemical weaponry in the U.S. arsenal. And we support full funding of the Veterans Administration, including full mental health care, housing, and vocational programs to try to stem the epidemic of suicide and homelessness among American veterans. The real difference in this election is not between one evil and a supposedly lesser evil, who are both themselves beholden to the same set of donors and who have essentially the same policies, both foreign and domestic. The difference is between the two major parties and the Socialist Party USA. This campaign is about a movement. It is about building something that will last after we are gone. It is about starting the conversation. It is about figuring out what we have to collectively do to end global exploitation, war, poverty, hunger, and underemployment once and for all. If you like these ideas and would like to look further into them, visit us at spusa2024.org or join the Socialist Party at socialistpartyusa.net. Read our principles and platform. Find a local or start a local in your area. Work with other activists, radical unions, peace movements, students, and veterans groups, tenant unions, and other groups who are fighting for social justice, economic equality, and radical substantive democracy. The Socialist Party USA is the most democratically run party in the country today. We will not change anything by waiting on elite politicians to change it for us. We will only change things by finding out what people want and need, and then organizing and fighting for that every day until we get it. The State of the Union is one that is controlled by and for capitalism. The thing that gives me hope is that I know it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to simply accept that nothing will fundamentally change. If we want change, we can make change. Thank you, and good evening. So you just got about 17 minutes of me talking. That was fun. Thank you, everybody, for paying attention to that brief message. Obviously, it wasn't the hour and 20 minutes that President Biden put up, and it didn't directly address every single thing that he said. But the one thing I will note is that in a lot of ways, the State of the Union from 2024 is almost not necessarily a carbon copy, but a rephrasing or a restatement of the 2023 State of the Union, where the government has been promising same thing after same thing after same thing and using Trump as a foil the entire time, rather than coming up with any ideas or any real plans that will actually seriously challenge the gross economic inequality in this country and the catastrophic wage problems and working problems that working Americans face. And so with that, I'd like to kind of give it over to Stephanie. Stephanie can briefly introduce herself and also give her thoughts about where we're at in the United States right now, the Biden administration, and basically the disaster of that administration for American workers. Stephanie,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Can you see me? I'm going to talk as if you can hear me.
We can hear you. Hit it.
Okay. I don't know if you can see me, but yeah. I don't even know where to start. No real surprises. Like you said, it was more of the same. The speech was obviously catered towards the owning classes. He doesn't offer any real solutions because we know the problems that he talks about all stem from capitalism and imperialism. The military industrial complex he talks about, like the solutions he has are all things that it's basically a rehashing of trickle down economics. You know, we're going to help the wealthy in hopes that, you know, as a byproduct, maybe working class people benefit with no mention of actually, it's not even reforming the capitalist system, much less replacing it. And a lot of these problems that he talks about are things that either Democrats failed to correct when they had the power to do so, like reproductive rights, which when they had the power, they could have codified that into law. Of course, they won't, because they need those wedge issues to scare people into voting for Democrats, just like the Republicans need to scare people with bigotry in order to vote their way. But ultimately, both parties represent the owning classes, and of course, this speech was catered to them. It's very frustrating. I understand someone who's been in politics for a long time, why this is so frustrating when we've been fighting for these policies and these actual solutions to the problems of capitalism, as well as what it feels like just to be American, a taxpayer, a voter, seeing politicians that don't represent working class people, that keep making the same promises, that sometimes borrow really watered down parts of what we're actually fighting for and promise it, but never actually deliver on it, never intend to. And I'm guessing this speech didn't have a huge audience because, why would you watch this? You know what he's going to say. We watch it because we want to respond and we want to offer actual solutions to the problems he's talking about. But, we already know what's going to be said. But, I wouldn't blame the average voter if they just kind of tuned out, because it's just more of the same. It's more empty promises. Biden has consistently throughout his career been very conservative. He sounds similar to the Republicans in his actions. He's definitely very similar to the Republicans, especially on economic issues, and he panders to certain social issues. But the Democrats have been fairly milquetoast in supporting human rights and democracy, especially in all the ways that it benefits the wealthy and powerful to subvert it. But I think this really just strengthens my resolve in the reason we have to have this campaign, because the American people need to know that there is more than just a choice between different types of capitalism. We do have solutions to these problems that go beyond, promising to tax the wealthy, but not actually doing that. Beyond even welfare states, we could have an economy that actually serves people rather than profit. We could have actual economic democracy. With all his talk about how great democracy is, why don't we extend that to the economic sphere? Why is it that we have to have all the wealth and power in the hands of just a couple companies and a few dozen people? And that's something they don't really want you to think about. And that's why we're here, is because we want to ask those questions, and we want to talk about what working people are actually facing, because we don't face that in theory. We don't trot out people who have had horrible things happen to them and pretend to honor them in this State of the Union in order to win votes from people that you don't care about. I mean that just makes me really sick that he would do that. And all politicians do that. Biden isn't special, but it's really just insulting to voters and anyone who actually cares about democracy, in my opinion.
We'll go ahead and give it back to Claudia now. Claudia, if you want to open up the stack for anyone that's got any kind of additional comments, feel free.
Oh, certainly. And thank you very much, Bill and Stephanie. I thought the talk that you gave was outstanding, very insightful. It's always good, I think, to reveal to everyone not only the travesty of the political theater that we all witness, but to give voice to the things that I think we're all thinking, that this is for show, right? It is mere theater as such, right? So I'm looking for any comments on to add to stack. I see this is my first time using this particular website, and I do see two tabs, one of which is labeled comments. I don't see anything in there quite yet. But Bill, I do see you on Stack first, so by all means, go ahead.
Sure, I'll actually kind of go over his speech. I took a minute by minute note taking. There's some really interesting things that he kind of brought out that we really need to kind of address here, since this is kind of a response to what he's saying. He had some jokes in there about buying drugs from Russia and about how the Republicans really don't want to cut Social Security, even though we know that they do, and so on and so forth. He's saying things like that there are jobs in the chip industry that are over $100,000 a year jobs without a college degree. I'm not really sure how accurate that is, but I don't really know too much about the chip industry. That seems like if there is those kind of jobs down there, and there very well may be, I'm not really sure, but it seems like those aren't the normal jobs that are being created in this country. Quite often, Biden continues the longstanding tradition of saying that we have low unemployment because look at how many people are doing these jobs, look how many new jobs we created. If we create 200,000 jobs in a month, and then 300,000 jobs in a month, and 400,000 jobs in a month, almost all those jobs are, as I mentioned in my response, they're like, you can work full time at those jobs and still qualify for SNAP. I think that Walmart got, kind of called out on this because they used to brag about SNAP or food stamps being part of their workers' benefit package, and that's the largest number of jobs that the neoliberal Democrats tend to create. Are these really low-paying jobs where people don't have any kind of economic security? There certainly aren't any benefits, and there certainly isn't any kind of pension to speak of. Pensions are sort of a thing of the past, unless you belong to the post office, I guess, and unless you're an elected official, then you can vote your own pension in. But we don't really have a lot of pension options anymore in this country. So a lot of these jobs that they're creating are these kind of low wage, no benefit, no protection sort of jobs where there's no job security or anything like that. He really made a big deal about the number of jobs that they're talking about. And even when he says we've gone down from something like 10% unemployment to 3.5% unemployment, 3.5% unemployment in the U.S. job force is still millions of Americans who are without a job. And that doesn't include the people who have just left the job market and have stopped looking for jobs. I mean, we don't even count those in this country. We count the 3.5% of Americans who are unemployed, not by choice. They're people who are on unemployment benefits or people who are seeking assistance because they don't have a steady income at all. That's still millions and millions of Americans. And as I mentioned in my response, we couldn't take actual full employment in this country. They call full employment 2% unemployment. That's full employment with 2% unemployment. That means still that millions of Americans are left out in the cold with 2% unemployment. Then, if we gave everybody a job, we couldn't give everybody a job because we got to have this permanent class, this permanent pool of unemployed labor that we can use to fill in when, someone decides to get a hair up their ass and decide that they're starting a union drive at their shop. And then the company just decides, well, we can just fire you and hire some person who really is very hungry and is a lot hungrier than you must be because you're demanding a union. So I would say that that's one of the biggest things as far as domestic policy that Biden really plays up, but he doesn't really tell the whole truth, and it doesn't ever get to the real kind of working class issue about this. They talked about the middle class plenty tonight. And I want to also point out before I hand the mic back over to Claudia that the middle class and the working class are two different classes. The middle class have investments. The middle class have some job security. But there are tens of millions of American workers out here that are not secure in their employment, that are food insecure, that are housing insecure. Poor and working families in this country are in the tens of millions. And those people work 1, 2, and 3 jobs, sometimes 4 jobs in their family, in their household, just to make rent. And so when they're talking about the middle class and everything like that, that still leaves out all those people that are struggling. And it doesn't look like, from his speech anyway, that there's any kind of help at all coming from the federal government for those people. They cut all kinds of subsidies. They allowed these states to roll back EBT for summer. In Iowa, for example, Kim Reynolds was allowed by the federal government to roll back summer EBT because she claims that there's a childhood obesity epidemic in the United States. And the way we get rid of childhood obesity in Iowa is to starve these poor kids out of existence. That's the kind of policies that our federal government under the Biden administration allows to happen in our various states. And it's not just happening in Iowa, it's also happening in Vermont. So these are the things that the Biden administration doesn't talk about, and what Biden didn't talk about tonight in the State of the Union, which we really need to pay attention to, because everyone on this call is affected by things like that. Basically, everyone that you all know, if you're listening to this, is affected by things like that. And you could be being affected by things like that too. So that's just something to keep in mind. Over.
Did you want me to say something?
Oh, you certainly can, Stephanie, if you'd like to.
I mean, it's pretty clear. Biden he's truly a dinosaur. He can't even pretend that he can relate to working class people and what they go through. He has speechwriters that try to make him relatable, but it comes off as very flat. I'm not convinced at all. What the Socialist Party USA is offering is, we're offering short-term policy solutions that would benefit the working class, but also a long-term solution to the problems caused by capitalism. Ultimately, we want a revolutionary solution that replaces capitalism with a system where the working people own and control the means of production, and they're used for the benefit of all rather than for the profit of the few. So the Democrats and Republicans, obviously, they're both capitalists. They're very clear on this. At best, the Democrats offer, and when I say at best, this is like the farthest left of the Democrats, is like a welfare state where tax money goes to support some welfare systems that buoy up some of the worst failures of capitalism, because a for-profit system by definition will only serve those it is profitable to serve. It is not profitable to serve those in poverty. Therefore, there's going to be people who are not served under capitalism. Therefore, you either have a welfare state or you just let them starve. And Republican solution seems to be to let them starve, or possibly to funnel money into religious organizations in hopes that they use some of it to help some poor people. Obviously, neither of these are great solutions. One is more wicked than the other, you could argue, but both perpetuate the same problem, which is that you have a small group of people that control all the wealth, and the economy is organized around enriching them rather than meeting the needs of working people, the people who actually add value to the economy, the people who make and build and think and create art and all of this. So we offer both things like a federal jobs guarantee. Last year they were saying that we need a $15 minimum wage. That's not even a living wage, and that's something we've been calling for. They copy some of our policies, and they water them down to the point where they're not even useful anymore, or they're so outdated that it's not even realistic anymore. But they have no intention of raising the minimum wage at all. And if you ask them, they'll say it's inflation. But I think it's more that they serve the owning classes, and that's who funds their campaigns. And even if they wanted to help the poor, if they did things that help the poor, they wouldn't get elected because they wouldn't get their campaigns funded. That's how the system is built to work. The system cannot be reformed to actually serve the working class. It is just not designed to do that. It is exploitative by nature. We've always been very clear on that. And that's why we do offer policies that would benefit working class people, but ultimately we do not support wage slavery. We want the workers to own and control the means of production. We want economic democracy. They were talking about fixing the lead in the water in the Rust Belt last year too. That didn't happen. Of course, they're not going to talk about the auto industry and how all the problems in the Rust Belt are due to the auto industry and the steel industry and the mining industry, and how they poisoned the water, and how they transfer jobs overseas because they do whatever is profitable. They don't care about the American economy. They care about profit. So Biden talks about how they're gonna build stuff here again. It's so out of touch and just unrealistic. Like any economist, no matter where they stand, has to know this is not going to happen. And if they really cared about a free market system, they wouldn't want all these government interventions just forcing capitalism to, work so there isn't mass starvation. That's how bad capitalism is. It needs all this intervention just to even function in the wealthiest nation on earth. People are living in extreme want, not to mention, the global south that has so much less wealth. It's just unworkable. And I don't know how anyone can be fooled by this if they're a working class person, because they see that it doesn't work. And, unfortunately, we're stuck with this two-party system. It's so hard for us to, we've been fighting really hard to get on the ballot. We've been fighting just to raise funds for this campaign. It's hard. But, we know that a better world is possible. That's why we do this. You have these solutions. Obviously we're not going to have nationwide ads running because we're not going to get any corporate funding. But I think if we get this message out, it does resonate with people. And it is, I encourage people to check out the campaign, check out the party, check out our principles. It is a source of hope for me. And doing this kind of work, it makes me so angry to watch politicians lie and pander and support wars and genocide and claim that they care about genocide, but then not do anything about it. But when you I work for a living. This is obviously, I don't make any money doing this. But it really makes it so much easier to cope with the tragedy you see and the suffering you see and the suffering you face as a working person when you're actually working with other people like you who share your concerns and have actual solutions to these problems. It's just very rewarding. So I encourage people to check us out.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. And I thought you touched on and really well articulated that fundamental contradiction of capitalism, that it's committed to its self-preservation and the preservation of the status quo at the expense of its own denizens, right? So thank you very much, Stephanie, for that. Josh, I see you next on Stack. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, comrades. A couple of things that you don't see, like the relation between last year's speech and this year's speech. There were a lot of promises that were made that weren't worked, that didn't come to fruition. Even though a $15, as you said, a $15 minimum wage would have been good 15 years ago, we need more like 25. But a couple of things. First of all, a shout out to all the protesters that blocked the motorcade on the way to the State of the Union address. I think that was a good show. And the thing that it's one thing to build up here and deliver aid to Gaza, which certainly isn't bad. But if we are still funding the bombs that are destroying Gaza, then it seems like the easier solution would be not to fund a genocide to begin with, and then we wouldn't have to send ships to feed who are left. Over 13,000 dead children should not be ignored. It's weird that people are kind of okay with that. It's weird that governments are like, well, yeah, they have the right to, Israel has a right to defend itself. But when you're talking about, it's hard to see that over the pile of 13,000 dead children. And another thing to think about is to do with the fact that that the interconnectedness of the struggles, like Gaza's getting bombed, is getting bombed, and that is a genocide. There's a genocide in the Congo. I would say arguably there's a genocide going on in Yemen, troubles all over the world, and Sudan as well. But all of that, all of that is bad. And people say, well, it's far away, but it's happening here too. Because gentrification is ethnic cleansing, straight up. And it's happening all over the place. The number of people in the city of Raleigh that are living in tents in their cars keeps going up. And while the government here is which is comprised of all Democrats, are saying that they're working on affordable housing, but they're working on affordable housing for people that make $85,000 a year, right? Which leaves out a large sector of the economy. And when it comes down to it, in our cities and towns, when people can't afford to live in the city, that work in the city, you're eventually not going to be able to run the city, because the people that do the work are the people that are suffering, but the people that are work are absolutely necessary for the running of our cities, towns, and municipalities. I think it's really, really important for us as socialists and people of conscience to do what we can, not only to uplift people where we can, but to stand up and not compromise politically. We can't. If we compromise our principles, then we're just aiding the people that are oppressing. And when it comes to ceasefire resolutions at cities or ceasefire resolutions for organizations, if you do not stand for a ceasefire because of you're worried about political expediency, then you are the problem. You are condoning it. Like if you see oppression and you do nothing about it, you are condoning oppression. Silence is consent. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you very much, Josh. Absolutely agree. And as the U.S. continues to build its pyramid of skulls like a monument to its own hubris, we should all bear in mind, like you said, that we need to stand in stark opposition to this. It is important that we distinguish ourselves from the kind of wickedness of imperialism, right? Bide, I see you up next on Stack.
Yeah, hi. My name's Bide. I'm a press manager for the Stodin Cholinsky campaign. I just want to kind of, there's a lot that could be said about Biden, about the administration that we're living under, about how capitalism works to insulate itself from critique at our expense. But I really want to frame something about Biden's State of the Union address this year. This is one of the few times that the current president of the United States actually is supposed to speak to you, is actually supposed to speak to the people, which means that for a party or a two-party system where all they ever serve you as a working person is optics, this is their chance to give you the best optics that they have to offer you. Not to make a bunch of promises, and they're here to make a bunch of promises that they're not going to keep, and to spin us around and take us into the spin room. But it's their one opportunity, or one of their biggest opportunities, to actually frame a message in a way that's supposed to be most positive towards you. They're supposed to be catering directly to you, whose vote they're trying to get. And this is the best message that they can come up with. When we talk about their State of the Union last year, their best message that they can come up with is, we'll lower the price of insulin. The rest of you who are still sick off other things, that's too bad. Because, and this is a quote from what Biden was saying last year, don't worry, pharmaceutical companies are still going to make plenty of money. That's their messaging for you. Let me ask you something. Do you feel represented? Do you feel like someone who comes to you when you're sick, and their first thing that they say is that, well, I'll give you a discount on this medication, but everything else you have to pay out of pocket because pharmaceutical companies still need to make their profits. They're going to make plenty of them this year. Do you feel represented? When you have a protest of people, actual people on the ground, screaming for a ceasefire, and this is all over the world. This is in so many cities in the United States. It's everywhere. I think it's something like, the polling says 70% of the Democratic Party wants a ceasefire. And the best he's saying is, well, maybe we can give you a 6-week ceasefire contingent on the release of all hostages. Do you feel represented? When entire context, when he is saying things like, the evils of Russia, while not even looking at what we're doing all over the world, not just in Israel, do you feel represented? Because let me tell you something, our tax dollars are going towards funding all kinds of wickedness around the world that you have no say in. And the fact that this is their best messaging that they can possibly give you to try to convince you to vote for them again, to try to convince you that they represent you. And they're not even catering to, they can't even get the messaging right about what your concerns are. Well, what does that tell you about how out of touch the two-party system is and the need to actually dismantle it? And let me say that for those of you who are watching who maybe have not entertained socialism or even third-party votes before, maybe you were like me and you were someone who just thought, well, I have to pick the lesser of two evils in order to make sure that the badder person doesn't get into office. I'd ask, how's that working out for us so far? And we cannot continue to expect a two-party system, a country whose leaders only bow to the will of those who have money, of those who have a control, ownership of the means of production. We cannot expect that party to ever hear our concerns, to ever actually fight for you. They will constantly give you scraps to keep you just satiated enough to have to make that decision every November or every 4 years in November to vote for the person who will give you one more scrap than the other person. At this point in time, we have to have the same bravery of all the people who are out there protesting. We have to have the same bravery of all the people who are divesting from this two-party system, the bravery of all the martyrs who are in Gaza, who have to survive through what is an ongoing genocide against them. And we have to have the bravery to say enough is enough. We have to take control into our own hands. And that starts with getting out of that two-party system. Stop taking the lesser of two evils. Who's to even say what's the lesser of the two evils anymore when your tax dollars are being used in the way that they are currently now? Let me tell you something. There are some devil's bargains that I would maybe make. I'm not going to make it for a $15 minimum wage where I still can't feed my family. I'm not going to make it for a president who offers me one drug at $35 a month, or $35 a shot or whatever it is, which is still a lot of, I'm not going to curse, but still a lot of money to a lot of people. And it's one drug for one condition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the scrap that he has to offer you. Is that a president? Is that a system that gives a damn about you?
No.
You have to, at this point, fight against it.
Yeah.
You have to fight against it. Please do not listen to these arguments anymore of the lesser of two evils, because where has it gotten us today? We have education classes, we have materials. Even if you don't want to, I probably shouldn't say this as a press manager, but if there are other third parties that you're invested in, that's good too. We need to break open their control on the reins of power. That's the most important thing, because no one is coming to save you. It has to be you. And we promise we will be there with you. We will be there with you, but it has to be you. Because look at what Biden has to say. He's offering you $35 insulin last year, which he hasn't made a reality yet. So that's all I have to say. Don't believe their BS. Don't believe it.
Absolutely agree, Biden. Thank you very, very much. the whole idea of the lesser of two evils is just a propagandistic tactic to trick us into thinking that we are furnishing some kind of popular support for a system which is only designed to extort us. I always say that the vulture also has two wings.
Yeah.
Now, I did have Alex next on stack, but I believe Alex has dropped. If anybody else would like to speak, just let me know. Oh, I see Alex has returned. And yeah, Alex, you go ahead. And then Naima, if you'd like to talk, it'll be open and available for you to do so. But go ahead, Alex.
Awesome. So I just wanted to comment on, Joe Biden saying our economy is the envy of the world. And that's really confusing if you're a working class person. And that's because he's not talking to us. He's talking to billionaires and bankers and CEOs and the wealthy. And most people in this country, I mean, you can't work full time and support a family. You can barely support yourself working full time. People are having to take part-time jobs. People aren't getting enough hours. If they get paid enough, you don't get enough hours. It doesn't really matter how much you make an hour. And the gig economy is a new, particularly destructive form of employment where not only you're selling your time and your labor, but also you're destroying your property. And so when Joe Biden talks about all these new jobs, but we working class people on the ground can see these jobs aren't providing for us. They're not providing for our families. And that's why we need to organize, join SPUSA or your local group that's active in your area. We need class solidarity and we need class consciousness. So we can, we've seen so many protests, people going out for Black Lives Matter during 2020 gets co-opted by a bunch of politicians who then turn around and give more money to the police. We see the protests for ceasefires, but 32 Democrats renominated yesterday are endorsed by AIPAC. So we need to build that class solidarity. So when we have these large scale protest numbers, we can really make change. And, we can't tax the rich and legislate our way to liberation and equality for everyone. It's going to take a movement and that class solidarity and a revolution to get us, true equality, true equity. So that's why Joe Biden thinks our economy is the envy of the world, because it is to the super rich. And meanwhile, we're left in the dust, half employed with gig economy jobs. Over.
Frank, can I cut in real quick?
Yeah, thank you very much, Alex, and definitely agree. Naima, if you would like to make any remarks, you are absolutely welcome to do so.
Thank you, my love. I appreciate that. I just want to bounce off of what my bestie said, Alex, talking about Joe Biden and class consciousness. It's just about, because me and Alex have conversations personally a lot about these issues, and it's difficult to meet people where they're at, because a lot of people don't have that class consciousness. They don't have political education. They don't really understand what's going on, or they don't give a shit, or they're just ignoring it. So that's my biggest struggle here in New Orleans, and I'm sure all over the country and all over the world. It's just like, people, as long as people can continue to go to a grocery store, buy their food, go to, like we had, just for example, we had an outage, that, I don't know if y'all are aware of that AT&T mobile outage that happened a couple weeks ago, and everybody just started showing up at AT&T stores, and like an AT&T associate is going to be able to tell you what the hell's going on with your phone. No one knew what to do, right? So it's just kind of like, I feel like, is an example of that's gonna happen when shit hits the fan. People are just gonna start showing up to places they think that they can go to get shit fixed. You know what I mean? Like, there's no political education, there's no understanding of our conditions, and people, as long as people can do the commerce thing and spend money and do their regular thing, like, nobody really gives a shit, right? So it's like everybody's talking about meet people where they are. And that's my biggest challenge, is just trying to meet people where they are. Because it's like I try to explain things to people, folks. Some people pick up on it. Other people are just like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Excuse my language, but I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And that's the most frustrating part to me. And I don't know. I'm opening that up to all of y'all, because that's been a big struggle for me, is trying to meet people where they are and trying to get people to understand what is happening around them. Do y'all feel where I'm coming from?
I do. That's why we got to do it together. You know,
Facts.
it can't be any
Yeah.
one of us. This is a collective movement for a reason. We share
Yeah.
the burdens. We share the goals. That's always in mind, right? We are aligned in our class interests, and
Facts.
we have to pick each other up and do it together. That's why we're all here, and that's why we want you. If you feel like you've been doing it alone, if you feel like no one is picking up what you're putting down, and you feel like you're on an island, we're here to tell you you're not. You're not on an island. We're here, and you know, there are a lot of people out here doing this work, and we're happy and willing, and your comrades in that struggle to be there and to help you get through it as well. So no one is doing it alone. This is a collective movement for a reason.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Whoo, it's just a lot.
I feel you.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I feel you.
Man, like, yeah, but that's really what it is. Like, just trying to, meet people where they are and get them to understand and try to get them involved to some capacity. Like, it's hard, but I mean, I still think there's a way. I still think there's a path, and we can do it. It's just we got to find that groove, that nook, and just make the shit happen,
Yeah, absolutely, Naima, and thank you as well, Bide. We're gonna wrap up the tonight's discussion right now. Just we've kind of gone over time that we had intended, but I wanted to thank everybody for joining us. If you find yourself in, say, Raleigh, for example, we have a candidate running for city council, Josh Bradley. He's in the chat. And if you're in Arkansas, there's William Sishi is running for, I believe, a Justice of the Peace position. Check him out. We have a gubernatorial candidate for North Carolina named Wayne Turner. If you are in that area, please check him out. And just thank you all again for coming out and listening to our discussion. And like Bide was saying, you're not on an island. If these things that we're saying resonate with you and are kind of like reflect what you were thinking, just know that there is a movement and there is a place for you in that movement. And we would love for you to join us so that we can one day bask in the glory of liberation once we finally overturn the capitalist hegemony, right?
And
so
quick,
yeah,
Claudia and Josh, I haven't seen y'all in a while. It's good to see y'all again. That's all I gotta say.
You as well, Naima.
I haven't seen y'all in a couple of years, but what's good? I hope y'all are doing well. I miss y'all, and I'm about to lock back in.
Yeah, you too, and look forward to hearing more from you in the future. It's great to see you. So yeah, I do not have any further content to add. Just want to remind everybody also, SPUSA2024.org. That is the campaign's website. And, Women's Day is coming up in about 5 minutes, according to my clock. So just be mindful of that as well. Looking forward to working with all of you in the future. So solidarity, and hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Good night, y'all.
Bye, everyone. Happy International Working Women's Day.
I know that's right.
Yeah, let's talk to you later. Let's do it again.
Yeah.